So it is that time. I'm a day or two off schedule, but nonetheless, it's here. Time to do another updated 2021 NBA mock draft, another one-round edition. I think next week I'm going to try and bang out a two-round version, but this time it's just one. You can check out all 30 picks for this one-round mock draft in the description box below. Make sure you smash that subscribe button and follow me on Twitter so we talk about NBA draft-related things and generally sports-related things and life-related things as well. When you look at this version of my mock, no change at the top. Detroit still taking Cade, Cunningham, number one, the guard from Oklahoma State, who I've referred to a little bit as Luka Light. You've seen some reports talking about, could it be that Detroit might be interested in Jalen Green? Do they think he might have superior athletic upside and superior scoring potential? And, I think there may be a little bit to that, but it sure feels incredibly unlikely. At this moment, at least, there's still a few weeks to go, so obviously things can change. But it sure feels like Cade Cunningham is the number one pick locked into Detroit. It certainly does. Because he's the type of guy that you can envision coming in there day one and making some type of impact. Jalen Green might take a little bit longer, although I would agree with the assessment that I think long term, his athletic upside, his scoring upside is greater than Cade Cunningham's. But I'm wondering what you guys think. If you were Detroit, would you take Cunningham number one or would you take Jalen Green number one? And depending on your choice, why would you do that? Or why wouldn't you want the other guy? I think where it gets a little more interesting to me, though, is Houston with that second pick. I think everybody's going to assume, probably rightfully so, that the choice is going to come down between Evan Mobley, the center from USC, and Jalen Green, who spent last season in the G League with the Ignite, easy for me to say, the Ignite team, him and Kuminga, both of them. And I think you're going to come down to the debate of, Evan Mobley certainly fits the mold of the athletic, modern NBA 5, whereas Jalen Green is that athletic, high scoring potential wing that every team needs in today's NBA. And look, I put Evan Mobley here. I keep going back and forth in terms of who this pick would be. In my opinion, if you're going off of the pure upside, I think it's Jalen Green needs to be the pick there. But they probably wouldn't feel too bad with Evan Mobley. I just look and I say, yeah, even if you get that modern big, like Mobley's got quite a bit of ways to go in terms of work to really get to his high potential. And I still think his highest potential does not meet Jalen Green's highest potential. And when you're sitting here, you got to roll the dice a little bit and you got to gamble on the higher upside because you're trying to draft that next franchise player. You're trying to draft that next star. And in a draft that likely has a couple of those dudes, you want to make sure you get one of them. And when you think about the way the modern NBA game is, again, we got to keep it real here. You'd rather have Jalen Green and his skill set than Evan Mobley and his skill set to build your team around. And that's just the reality. Which puts Detroit in a pretty good, Toronto in a pretty good space here, because you would assume if Mobley goes 2, Cleveland probably takes Jalen Green at 3, and if they move on from Colin Sexton and they want to play Darius Garland at the 1, then you're going to play Jalen Green at the 2. I really like that combination, backcourt long-term for the Cavs. Toronto sits there at 4, and they get Jalen Suggs to fall to him. Look, Kyle Lowry's in his mid-30s. He's basically close to done. Van Fleet is more of a bench guy, more of a guy you play a little off the ball. But Jalen Suggs feels like he could come in and be that type of dude for Toronto. Like, for them, they luck out, and they luck out on a guy that could, make a big impact for them early on in his NBA career. For Orlando at 5, I'm still wondering, and you guys tell me, you think there's any chance that Kuminga drops a little bit? I'm wondering if it's that thing of people have been hyping him up for a while and he was playing in the G League and people are seeing some things and they're just assuming and presuming that puts him in top 5 consideration. I don't know, man. Just when I've watched him so far, and maybe it's a thing of I see a clear differentiation between the top 4 guys in this mock and then him and the Scottie Barneses, the Mitchells, the Johnsons, and so forth of the world. Maybe there's such a departure from 4 to 5 that is leading me to not feel as highly about Kuminga as maybe I should. But I think he's got a lot of work to do, and maybe a lot more work than you would really be comfortable with taking a guy in the top 5, because even then you got to ask yourself, what is really his true upside? Whereas I look at Scottie Barnes and I say, him going 6 to the Thunder, who knows what he'll ever become as a defender. But you're talking about a guy that could defend all 5 positions on the floor with that size and that length. Like, he's going to be an elite defender in the modern NBA. Like, that I get. Now, Oklahoma City, that might not be the thing you need most. You need, like, guys that could be stars or superstars. But to get a guy like that you know you could trot out there, ideally to me in the NBA, you line him up at the 4, but he could defend all over the place. If he develops any offensive game on a consistent basis whatsoever, like, he has a chance to be better than a couple of guys that were taken ahead of him in this draft. If not, absolute worst case scenario, you've got a 3rd or 4th option on your team, maybe more of a 4th option on your team, but is absolutely a critical, important defender, brings versatility, could defend on the pick and roll, could defend man up, could defend in the post, could do all of that shit, and he's a guy that you can have in there late in games. Like, certain front offices and coaches are going to love his defensive abilities. While that's not the most important thing in today's league, when you get a guy like this who could defend like he could defend all across the floor, all 94 feet of it against all 9-5 positions, like, that's the sheer reason why he's a top 6 talent in this draft. Golden State, Davion Mitchell, if he's there and, a guy like Scottie Barnes or Kuminga doesn't fall to him, then he's somewhat logical pick because he can play at the point. He could help Curry play off the ball a little bit. He could also spell Steph some. He can also defend. Like, you make it a little easier for you, assuming Clay comes back healthy, which based off of the last 2 seasons is a pretty big assumption at this point, I grant you. But to be able to put Mitchell in, again, when you're looking at a guy like Mitchell, this is a guy that even on a team that's going to have big expectations, a team that's going to be looking at, hey, can we compete here? Can we contend in the Western Conference? Like, Mitchell is a rookie that you could plug in here, and he could play minutes for that team and have a decent role, an important role, because, again, of his defensive abilities. Now, typically, I would say, when you talk about top 10, like, I'm trying to draft, in today's game especially, I'm trying to draft offensive upside. But for the situation, for the team, I think Mitchell does make a lot of sense. For Orlando at 8, I've got Jalen Johnson. This is the thing of, they're gambling. Maybe they feel like he could be an Aaron Gordon type. I know his game is not similar to Aaron Gordon, but maybe some type of cross between an Aaron Gordon and a Jason Tatum. Johnson's one of those guys to me that he could either be a bust that we largely mock, like a Stanley Johnson type of guy in 3 or 4 years, or he comes up and he's another guy that if his mind is right and he's focused and he's in the right place and he develops his game, like, he could end up being a top 3 or 4 player out of this draft. Sacramento at 9 with Franz Wagner, whatever the fuck. Feels kind of like a basic pick for them, not terrible. Like, they got Tyrese Halliburton late in the lottery last year, and that was just a hell of a pick by them. They got a guy that, was one of the best rookies in the league last year and just really fits well in terms of his versatility offensively, playing multiple positions at the NBA level. Wagner is a guy they could bring in and he could defend right away. He'll be able to defend on the wings. He could defend 2s. He could defend 3s. What's his true offensive upside, we'll see, but, I could kind of get it there. And as you go through the rest of the lottery, like, that's where it starts to get to be a little more of a crapshoot to me, is after about pick 7 with Golden State, really even like with Orlando and Sacramento. Like, this is a draft, again, where I've talked about before that I just feel like the differentiation from guy like 8 to guy 20 or 22 really is not that great. It really, really isn't. So what you could potentially see are some guys that you've been seeing projected as top 10, top 12, lottery, top 14 picks fall into the 20s. And other guys that you've seen mocked a little lower could end up shooting up and going quite a bit higher than you might think. And I certainly think that's the case. Like, I know I've got Kai Jones in this particular mock draft at 14, but when you look at this draft, there's kind of a lack of quality big men. Like, you've got Mobley as that top one, and then that next wave is more of Sengun and Kai Jones. Like, those guys could rise a little bit because teams are going to be looking for that Embiid type, that Jokic type. They're going to look for that type of big, even a Brook Lopez type, a DeAndre Ayton type, if you will. And they might look at some of those guys and say, hey, you know what? those guys are a little rarer to find in today's league as opposed to this draft, which is loaded with guards and loaded with wings, and I don't disagree with that assessment. So there might be a situation here where for Sengun and for Jones, they might see their stock rise a little bit higher, even higher than where it maybe should be, just because of the lack of depth of talent at that big man, more traditional 4-5 position this year. They could be positioned relatively well. But I've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it again. Like, even some of these guys that you're looking at being drafted in the 20s, like if you're a playoff team and you want to be able to draft a guy that can come in and contribute right away and play some type of role, this is a pretty good draft for that. Really good draft for that, actually, including probably some guys that you could take early to mid-round 2. This is a good draft class. It's not a legendary all-timer type of draft class, but this is a pretty damn good draft class. It's got some real marquee talent at the top, and it's got a lot of depth, especially in terms of perimeter and wing players, which should make a lot of teams that maybe missed out on higher picks in the lottery or even don't have a first-round pick pretty happy.